Now, Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority.
105.9 FM.
And AM 630.
WMAL.
8:07 on the Morning Majority, talking to Dan Mitchell, economist and senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Good morning, Dan.
Hey, Mary Catherine, how are you?
Good, thanks for being here early, even post-Super Bowl. I know it can be tough. So there was a jobs report on Friday, 243,000 jobs created in the private sector, or 257 minus the 14,000 lost in government. Most people say, oh, pretty good look. What's your take on it?
Well, it is good news. Maybe not if you're a Republican political strategist.
Right.
It's kind of funny to watch all the positioning on this thing. But, yes, we are moving in the right direction. The only issue, and it's a big one, is whether we're moving in the right direction from a much higher unemployment rate, if you factor in things like discouraged workers, partially unemployed or underemployed workers and things like that. Some people say, oh, we're still over 15%. By some measures, they're right. But whether or not you're looking at the official unemployment rate, the unofficial unemployment rate, the good news is that, yes, we do seem to be moving in the right direction. Here is, though, one number, though, that I think isn't getting enough attention, and that's something called the employment population ratio, and that's the number of people working compared to the potential employable population, you know, the right ages and things like that, not counting 5-year-olds or 80-year-olds. And that number really hasn't moved much. And that signifies, I think, continued weakness for the economy. That might not actually filter into the political process. People might not understand it. But if we continue to stumble along with very weak 2% growth, if we never get the normal bounce back we get from a recession, that's not a good sign for America.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Romney say, well, let's talk about the real unemployment rate. Is that going to be what you hear from Republicans? And really, what is the real unemployment rate?
Well, that's the big issue about where are we starting from. Everyone agrees we're moving in the right direction, but are we moving in the right direction from an unemployment rate north of 15%? Or are we moving from, you know, what were we just 6 months ago, 9%, and we're now down to 8.3%? There's no question we have positive movement. But if I was Romney, and I wish I had his money, if I was Romney, what I would do is I would focus on perhaps the administration's first big mistake, which is early on in, I guess, February of 2009, they put out that estimate saying if we pass the $1 trillion stimulus, at this point in time, we would have a 6.3% unemployment rate.
Right.
And in reality, even if you accept the administration's benchmark, it's 8.3%. So by their own measure, by their own assertions, by their own publications, the stimulus was a failure. This has been historically a very, very weak economic recovery. And I think the argument can be made that big government is holding back growth. But Republicans, for whatever reason, don't seem to be very capable of making that argument, maybe because they were in favor of big government when Bush was in there.
All right. Well, looking a little bit down the road, and it's going to be true, I think, for no matter who the next president of the United States is, whether it's Obama, Romney, or whoever, you're seeing, at least I've seen it in my life, Brian will accuse me of being Andrew Mitchell here and believing that everything that happens in my life is what happens in the real world. But I'm seeing a lot of people who are baby boomers, my parents and their friends, they're all about to retire. So what does that do to the unemployment rate? I know maybe bad news for Social Security, whether or not we can pay it down the road, but what does it do to the unemployment numbers and the creation of jobs or having younger people be able to fill those jobs?
Well, in theory, if you have 10,000 people a day retiring, which is what we're going to get out of the baby boom generation when we're in the full swing of it, that should be good news for unemployed people because there's going to be more and more slots opening up. But it's bad news for the economy to have fewer and fewer workers compared to the number of people they have to support. If you want to have a good idea of what's wrong with, say, Greece, they have more than 50% of the people in their economy somehow dependent on government retirement benefits, on government welfare benefits, having these make-believe government jobs. And when you have a majority of people in your country riding in the wagon and a minority pulling the wagon, that doesn't work. And so in America, as we have this big baby boom generation, sort of the pig moving through the python, and they all retire, and the politicians keep raising taxes to finance a bigger and bigger welfare entitlement state, we're no different than Greece in the long run. So that's what I would be worried about. Yeah, we might have fewer workers chasing more jobs, but if those jobs come with 50 and 60% tax rate, the economy just isn't going to be growing, and we're going to wind up in the same situation we're seeing in Europe.
Is there some small amount of good news in the fact that for a little while now, the government has been sloughing off jobs and the private sector has been adding them? I don't want to be callous to the people in government who lost their jobs, but that seems to be the trajectory you want to be on.
Oh, it is, and that's why whenever I talk to some of my Republican friends, and they want to always look to see, okay, where's the dark lining of this silver cloud? There are good points to this employment report. The unemployment rate is down, and as you identified, the key thing is we need to be shrinking the size of the government workforce, which is still enormous. And, of course, as CBO even confirmed, they're well overcompensated compared to people in the productive sector of the economy. Now, it's mostly happening at the state and local government level. Uncle Sam has not lost that many jobs, and it's still far too big. But, yes, that is good news. We need more people pulling the wagon. We need fewer people riding in the wagon.
Yeah, but that's exactly when you say that, it's sort of a little bell went off in my head when I know that 50% of Americans are paying taxes and 50% of Americans are not paying taxes. We're sort of on the bubble in that regard, are we not?
There's a lot of academic work about what it means to a society, to an economy, when you have a dependency ratio with too many people relying on government and not paying for government. Now, to be fair, when people talk about 50% of Americans not paying taxes, they're talking about the income tax. A lot of those people are still paying payroll taxes, which can be a pretty hefty burden. So I don't think we're not France or Italy or Greece yet. Most Americans still view themselves as having responsibility for their own lives, taking care of their own families, not mooching off Uncle Sam. So I don't think our political culture has been eroded. Our social capital hasn't been debased in the way it has been in Europe, but I do worry that the trend line is negative on that.
Yeah.
Dan, you've covered these numbers specifically, the BLS, the labor statistics, for years, and you've watched the media cover them for years. What is your take on how they are treated during the Bush administration versus the Obama administration by the media?
I think there's no question that the media will pick out the good numbers when Democrats are in charge and the bad numbers when Republicans are in charge. But I wonder how much power the media really has. Yes, they can control the narrative and influence the 1 or 2 day story.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think what matters a lot, and this is why Republicans might want to be a bit nervous, if the trend line is positive, if people feel each passing month, well, things seem to be getting better, whether or not it's because of the president or in spite of the president, the point is that things seem to be getting better. That's going to have an effect on the public policy debate and the political outcomes.
Yep. All right, Dan, thanks so much for joining us. Good to have you. Dan Mitchell with Cato.